James is a pharmacist with Bitcoin laser eyes who is sending you sats each time you buy prescription medication. His Bitcoin story is super interesting, and you're going to want to learn more about how to stack sats when you go to the pharmacy. We love James. Here he is. Welcome to Sat Chats, the Bitcoin podcast where we chat about sats. Sats are the smallest part of a Bitcoin, the same way pennies are the smallest part of a dollar. So with Sat Chats, we are building the world's biggest Bitcoin welcome center to serve as your gateway to generational wealth. If you are new to Bitcoin, we want to chat about sats with you. Head to satchats.com to grab your slot in the studio today. I'm your host, Stuart, Bitcoin Maxi, who wears prescription sunglasses to protect you and your loved ones from my Bitcoin laser eyes.
And I'm your co-host, Chris, founder and CEO of Ithaca Hummus, proud multi-coiner, Bitcoin smash buyer. Go to our YouTube page and subscribe. Here's why. If you are one of the first 1,000 subscribers, you will be entered into a 1 million sat giveaway. We'll be selecting one of our first 1,000 subscribers on YouTube to win 1 million sats. The other thing that we're going to do at 1,000 subscribers is unlock a live show on YouTube Friday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
So today in the studio, we have got James, who was first introduced to me through a screen cap from my publicist as a pharmacist with laser eyes. And I was like, let's go. This is going to be a hard yes for me. So we're going to be getting James's Bitcoin story today, along with some pretty interesting pharmaceutical applications of Bitcoin. But before we do, help our satillionaires out there get to know you a little bit, James.
Well, yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on, Chris and Stewart. What's up, Sat Chat community? My name's James. I'm actually a pharmacist by trade. I've been doing this probably my whole life. Used to own community pharmacies, retail pharmacies, also assisted living facilities. I think like a lot of providers in 2020, just got super burnt out with COVID and said, this isn't really what I want to do anymore. I spent some time reflecting really on what I wanted to do in the future, and I really fell in love with Bitcoin. For me, it was like the first time when I was a kid, I found out about the internet. You had Ask Jeeves, Space Jam, and I was just getting this feeling of like, wow, Bitcoin is so cool. This thing has such global reach and applications. Like the sky is limitless with Bitcoin. So I started wanting to apply that to healthcare. And, I sort of came up with NiHowdy. I'm actually the founder of NiHowdy. So we help individuals and organizations save on prescription drugs, on the cost. But what makes us really different is we actually return drug rebates back to the users. No one in I would say in America does that. And our drug rebates, they come in the form of Bitcoin.
Is that a play on like a Texas style and a Mandarin Chinese style where it's like ni hao, but it's like a NiHowdy?
Yeah, it absolutely is. You got it. It was kind of funny because my co-founder and I were actually both pharmacists, but we used to have this one mutual patient that would come in and say that to us all the time. And it sort of always stuck with us. And we just kind of wanted to continue with that. A lot of healthcare companies, they have very generic and boring names. It's always something care, something healthcare. And it was just like boring. If I'm going to, work on something for the next 5, 10, 20 years of my life, I wanted to be somewhat, memorable.
Yeah, NiHowdy, N-I space Howdy. So I want to unpack how NiHowdy works a little bit later in the show because it blew my mind when I took a look at it, and it made me want to need prescription medication for some reason. I was like, what would be nice is if I could get sick and then have to go get some prescription medication, and then I could get some sats. So we will get into that before the show's over. But first, we always like to start with our Bitcoiners, their Bitcoin story. You talked about finding Bitcoin at some point, but when was that? What year was that? And how did you come across it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably that's quite interesting. I feel like my story's a little bit unconventional, but somewhat conventional in the Bitcoin world. For me, it was really in college. The only time or the only way you could buy weed in college was actually through the Silk Road. So, I ended up going on PayPal. You would buy some Bitcoin, and yeah, you would have a package just show up the next day at your dorm. So it was great. But I always thought it was like this, nerd money, this like digital gift card. So I didn't pay too much attention to it. I had a laptop that had maybe about 100 Bitcoin or so, and I threw it away after college because I just didn't think there was much value in Bitcoin at that time. Come to grad school, I wanted to actually focus on psychiatry. And one of the things we always have to know is like, where do your patients get recreational drugs? And sort of, I started looking into the Silk Road again. I started understanding what Bitcoin was. And that was my second time really revisiting Bitcoin. When I used to own my pharmacy, it was kind of towards the end. I was like, all right, well, there's Bitcoin, there's all these other different cryptocurrencies. And I started, buying Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and it was just kind of like a rug pull after rug pull. And I started realizing like all these other cryptocurrencies are just like they're digital tokens, they're assets with an issuer. But Bitcoin itself, it's like an asset without an issuer. This Satoshi Nakamoto guy is not here anymore. He's gone. It's probably the most selfless act like anyone can ever do. So I sort of like started realizing, the value proposition of Bitcoin, it's far greater than all these other cryptocurrencies that are out there. So that kind of, made me more of a Bitcoin maximalist. But really, the most compelling argument was really looking at things on a Bitcoin standard, just how much more affordable things are starting to get. I'm sure a lot of Bitcoiners have seen on Twitter a lot of different charts where they'll compare the prices of housing, from like 2018 to present day, and they'll show you like, yeah, the median price of houses are increasing, but if you look at it on a Bitcoin standard, it's actually decreasing. So these are like very compelling arguments for me to really say, what, this is really what I wanted to start investing in. So I started, divesting out of real estate. I didn't really think stocks were great anymore. The returns were kind of shit in my opinion. So I started looking at Bitcoin. I was like, this is amazing, and sort of fell in love with that. So yeah, that's my Bitcoin story.
I can relate to that because the the journey I went on had a number of different steps, but I eventually reached a point where I decided to do some math on how much things cost in Bitcoin terms, because I was really coming at it from a dollar perspective, and it opened my eyes. Like I think the website I used, James, was something like pricedinbitcoin21.com or pricedinbtc21.com, something like that. It tracks like all different types of stocks, all different types of commodities, homes, just all sorts of things. And it shows you like priced in Bitcoin over like a 1 year period, 2, 3, 4. Effectively, the entire website just has negative 99% in every category across every time frame. Like homes are 99% cheaper in Bitcoin. Gold is 99% cheaper in Bitcoin. Apple stock is 99% cheaper in Bitcoin. And I got to this point where I was like, man, my stocks are dumb. I don't want them anymore. I'm going to sell them and buy Bitcoin. The gold coin in my house is dumb. I don't want it anymore. I wanted some Bitcoin. My Magic the Gathering card collection, the ones I'm not using, the rares and mythic rares I'm not using, I'm getting rid of those. I had some like chairs, and I'm like, dude, let's do a yard sale. I had my wife, I was like, babe, you got to help me put together a yard sale because like I need to stack more sats. So I had this moment that sounds like yours where it kind of clicked for me. I was like, wait, not only is Bitcoin this incredible force that's going to reshape the world and, bring fairness into all these different areas and right size so many different things that have bloated beyond where they should be or shrunk too far from where they should be. But just from a pure I want more money in my life perspective, from a pure number go up technology perspective, like it's Bitcoin, man. Like even if you don't want to give Bitcoin all of the cool stuff that it's actually going to do for us, just from a price perspective and asset perspective, it's the best.
It absolutely is. I love the chair reference, by the way. That's like a trending sort of like meme on Twitter, sell your chair and buy more Bitcoin. It always gets me.
Is anybody sitting in this chair? Nobody is. Put it in the yard sale. I'm telling you, dude. I look at all the stuff in my house. I'm like, none of this is any good.
Yeah.
None of this is any good.
Sell junk. Get rid of it, sell it.
Seriously. So I might have to do it again. I don't know. But so when you were, you came across Bitcoin for the first time in your journey along the Silk Road, and a number of our guests have also come at Bitcoin that way. And then you tossed the laptop with 100 Bitcoin on it. Yoicks! And we do enjoy pain on this show. So if Bitcoin's at about 90,000 right now, and you had 100, then that's 900,000, 9 million, right? That's $9 million in today's terms. Yoicks, right? One dude, James, threw away a laptop with $42 million worth of Bitcoin on it. And one guy had an opportunity to buy enough Bitcoin near the very beginning in order to have $1 billion today, and he didn't do it. So, everybody has experienced that, but you came back to it a little bit later on, still in terms of the Silk Road. And then it sounds like at the end, near the tail end of your time managing your pharmacy, that's when you really started to research it in earnest. Is that what I heard?
Yes, correct.
And what time was that? Was that 2018, 2019, 2020?
Around 2019, I'd say. It's like when I started getting a little bit more serious about Bitcoin.
How did you teach yourself about Bitcoin? Did you watch YouTube videos? Did you find podcasts? Did you read some books? Did you hit Satoshi's original material? How for someone who's a satillionaire, who's a beginner, who's like, I want to learn more, but I don't even know where to start. What was your learning journey like?
Oh man, mine was rough. I'd watch YouTube very frequently, and I'd find like influencers talking about the next shiny thing. And I started realizing a lot of these people are being paid to promote these sort of things. And I got, rug pulled pretty bad by listening to this one influencer one time. And I was like, you know what? Like, the common theme here is they're all assets with issuers at the end of the day. They have a marketing team. They have someone, who's on Twitter on behalf of the organization talking about how Solana is the next greatest thing, or Ethereum's the next greatest thing. But Bitcoin itself, it's very strange. You look at this as something that's owned by 1% to 2% globally. There's no marketing team. There's no, the founder, Satoshi Nakamoto, he's not even around anymore. It's very strange to have that sort of willpower to not even tweet about it if you're alive. To build such a global brand that's, internationally recognized, it's sort of crazy. But sort of going back, how did I sort of teach myself? I think it was through a lot of max pain, unfortunately, investing in things I shouldn't have bought. And that's kind of a painful journey. But, for someone who's probably listening to this podcast and you're starting off your Bitcoin journey, I would say, definitely check out SatsChat, bitcoin.org, obviously, because it's run by the Bitcoin core team. Just sort of, I would say, go to your local meetups and talk to like actual Bitcoin maximalists and start to understand, like, why is it Bitcoin? Why is it not these other shiny things that, other people are promoting? That's probably the way I would sort of approach it if I were to recommend Bitcoin to someone who's kind of new, getting into this space, or just wants to learn more.
For the satillionaires who have never heard the term rug pull, what is a rug pull, and how does it feel to have the rug pulled out from underneath you?
Well, I can tell you it feels terrible, but a rug pull is, when you invest in something and you put your monetary energy into whatever token it is, thinking that, it's going to do better in the future, but you start to realize that, people are actively selling while they're promoting something. It's kind of disgusting, but it happens very frequently, especially on the Ethereum blockchain, on Solana's blockchain. It's kind of gross, but, just avoid those as much as possible if you can.
Yeah. So a rug pull is when someone creates a shiny new cryptocurrency and, usually outlays cash to hype it up as much as possible. And when you jump in because you're a crypto casino guy or a meme coin guy, you basically pump it up and then they take all the cash and run, right? That's like a pump and dump, as it's called, and you get rug pulled, which some in the community, for all you satillionaires out there who want the lingo, will just shorten to rugged. Mm-hmm. I got rugged. I think that's so, obviously it's horrible to get rug pulled, but it's kind of like I don't know if that's a euphemism or a dysphemism, but that's just a hilarious way to talk about getting absolutely wrecked in these cryptos. I got rugged.
James, you also mentioned the Bitcoin core team. Could you talk a little bit more about that for our audience who might not know what that is?
I probably would not be the best one to answer that, but essentially there's a group of, I would say, open source developers that sort of band together to, do improvement proposals on Bitcoin's protocol. And that's kind of the best way I can explain it, I guess.
Yeah, it's beautiful that like Bitcoin is maintained by regular people. It is supported by regular people through the nodes. It's mined by regular people, and it's used by regular people. You know, we're not at the top tier of the nation state printing fiat currency, which, by the way, sounds exactly like a cryptocurrency. I mean, you talked about these shiny things that are, you know, centralized and issued by someone. It's the same thing as the nation state paper, man. Whereas Bitcoin has no issuer. So once you started looking into Bitcoin in earnest around 2019 or so, it sounds like you consolidated most of your holdings into Bitcoin. The pharmacies went away, the assisted living facility went away, your stocks went away. You know, is it safe to say that you effectively adopted a Bitcoin standard and put, you know, if not all, the lion's share of your functional wealth into Bitcoin?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Dude. Oh, James. Yes. We love James because so many people who come on our show are like, well, maybe I could understand it as a store of value, but I can't use it to buy things these days. So maybe I'll get a little bit, or even if they got to a point where they're like, dude, maybe I could convert. They're like, but it's so volatile. What if my entire net worth drops by 10% in a day? And we love guys like you and like Jake, who just pretty much Bitcoin is your money and it's working, you know, like how do you feel about being on a Bitcoin standard? Do you get, you know, are you in a position to watch the quote unquote price all day? Do you get nervous when it quote unquote dips? Or, you know, have you been in Bitcoin long enough to where the exchange rate that you paid is so far below all this vacillations on top that, you know, it doesn't really matter to you?
I mean, you brought up some fair criticisms and points about Bitcoin that I say a lot of no coiners would mention about. It is very volatile, you know, for that aspect. But the way I sort of manage my finances, I think about in terms of Sats flow. So when I get paid immediately, I convert it to Bitcoin. And when I have to pay something out, I have to sort of look at it in terms of how many Sats are leaving my account. As long as my account at the end of the day is Sats positive, I'm happy. So, but yeah, I mean, to your, you made a point here about, you know, it's very volatile. And I have to say, Bitcoin is still emerging technology. You have to understand that, you know, maybe only 1% of the world has subscribed to Bitcoin or owns Bitcoin right now. And yes, there is a criticism where you can't use this to buy things every day with merchants. But I do think, and I see this in the startup world, there's a lot more merchants and providers out there that are accepting Bitcoin today. So it's not to say that, you know, it's not going to be used in the future, but I do think, you know, 10 to 20 years out, it'll be a little bit more mainstream in terms of being able to pay things in Bitcoin and being able to, use this every day at, say, you know, your retail store, whatever it is.
The actual interface with the fiat world, if my entire wealth was in Bitcoin, and you know, the exchange rate, it's going up, it's going down, I get it. I believe that I would attempt to pay for things with a credit card. And then once per month, I would pay that credit card down to zero by selling off some of my sats to get the corresponding amount of fiat. And that's kind of how I would interface with the world, since we can't necessarily just buy everything with sats right now. how do you manage the exchange between fiat and Bitcoin? Are you routinely exchanging? Are you doing it once a month with that kind of credit card thing? Like how do you operate if you are on a Bitcoin standard?
Yeah, for me, it's, I do keep some cash on hand, but if my exchange rate tends to be a lot less than, what I bought it for, then I'll end up just burning my cash instead first rather than Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself is hard money. But the way I look at it is, as long as my exchange rate is a little bit better when I'm selling, then I'm okay with it, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to stack sats here. I mean, if you look at everything, like in terms of the US dollar, we keep inflating it. Your purchasing power of the US dollar keeps going down year over year. You have inflation as well. With Bitcoin, the supply or the inflation is much more predictable. It becomes deflationary after all the coins are mined. But you have it's a set of rules that everyone can sort of see and, can sort of subscribe to. And there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever. Like, that's it. It's final. So if you divide all the assets in the world by 21 million Bitcoin, I mean, it's kind of the sky's the limit in terms of how much Bitcoin could be valued or worth. Um, but in terms of, trying to divide every asset against the US dollar, you really don't know what's going to happen in terms of, are we going to print more money? Are politics going to play a huge influence on that? What's going to happen? Or, is it possible that the US dollar is going to default and be replaced by something else that we don't know about? So sort of looking at this in terms of like monetary energy, you want to preserve it as much as possible. Bitcoin is the best way to go here. If you mentioned something about store of value a little bit later or a little bit earlier. And, I always hear about a lot of people, they want to buy real estate. It just seems like every time they buy real estate, they hold on to it for 5-10 years later, it goes up. And a huge function of that price rise isn't really because of demand. It's really because we're printing more money. Every time you print more money, banks have more money to lend out. They make money on the interest. Sort of the pricing of houses keeps going up. But if you take away the US dollar and you try to divide, real estate, all the real estate in the world by Bitcoin, I mean, again, sky's kind of the limit in terms of how much Bitcoin could be valued here. But I do see a world one day, and I think you guys sort of subscribe to this, is that a sat one day will be, worth $1. I have a very long-term view of that. And, for a lot of the listeners who are starting to get into Bitcoin, there is short-term volatility, but you have to really zoom out and look at this in terms of 4-year, 8-year, 12-year sort of increments, sort of is the best way to go. And the reason I picked the 4, 8, 12-year sort of increments is really because that's when the halving of it sort of occurs for Bitcoin.
James, we had a guest yesterday, number 46, Draco, who brought up one of the risks to Bitcoin that I would love to see and hear your response to, which is that, given the distributed nature of Bitcoin being so inherent to its value, what could happen if a small consortium of central banks and nation states were to accumulate a significant amount of the Bitcoin network and then kind of collude around, what happens to the Bitcoin moving forward after that? How do you think about that risk to Bitcoin?
Yeah, and I would say that's a fair criticism. But the thing to remember here is, just because you own more Bitcoin doesn't mean you necessarily have control over the network. It doesn't necessarily mean that you could change the rules. Sort of the things that sort of get conflated in sort of like traditional finance and I would say Bitcoin is that, typically you would think the more money you have, you could change the rules a little bit better. In terms of Bitcoin, the rules and the protocol is already set, and really the miners are the ones that are enforcing that, and the nodes are the ones that sort of like hold the history of all the transactions that have happened. You would have to convince, and I don't know how many exahash of mining power there is, but you would have to attack the network and sustain that attack for a long duration of time in order to change the rules. To say, I want to change it from 21 to 42 million Bitcoin or whatever it is. It would be very hard for a nation state or even many nation states to sort of collude and agree to use all their energy that they produce and sort of, attack the network. It'd be very difficult. So kind of, recapping is like, just because you own more Bitcoin doesn't necessarily mean you could change the rules of the game. The protocol is set in stone. It's open source. Anyone could review the code. It's pretty amazing in that aspect. But yeah, I mean, there is a reality where, nation states could just say, look, we want to just print as much money as we can right now and buy Bitcoin. But for the first time in history right now, you kind of see what all these nation states are doing, their reaction and their feelings towards Bitcoin. And this is the first time in the world you can actually front run other people and say, hey, look, this is a time to get into Bitcoin before all these other nation states do. And I think that's worth definitely betting on. If you look at trying to make a bet on stocks, like say, Apple, they're like a $2 trillion company. I don't know how much they're doing in global revenue right now, but if that stock price were to double, they would effectively need to double the amount of gross revenue that the company brings in. They would have to create a new iPod. They would have to create a new iPhone. I don't know what it is that they have to create. But in terms of like Bitcoin, betting on Bitcoin, you start to see like, what is the value, potential value in the future before all these other nation states get in, before all these larger corporations get in? What is the delta of that? And that delta, it's unknown, but I would say it's much higher than trying to bet on, Apple trying to double its, market cap. If you're looking for a 2x, then, it's probably very difficult. But in terms of what that sort of multiplier is for Bitcoin, it's fairly unknown. But, I speculate it's very high. I just don't know what that percentage is. But again, it's a very big number, in my opinion.
I like that. That's how I feel too, James, where Bitcoin is for everyone. Bitcoin is for friends. Bitcoin is for enemies. Bitcoin is for savers. Bitcoin is for spenders. Just because you've got your share of Bitcoin, which might be a whole bunch if you're a nation state or a corporation, doesn't mean you control Bitcoin. And those of us who are stacking sats faithfully are going to benefit from these larger entities that come after us, right? Let's talk about getting some sats in exchange for our prescription medication. Come on. I'm so excited about this, James, because I've been exploring ways to get sats for stuff. Like I've been researching bank accounts that pay interest on your dollars in sats. I've looked at some credit cards that basically give you rewards in sats. And you're the first ever example that I've ever come across of a pharmacy discount program that rewards you in sats. Like, can you tell us more about NiHowdy and, how it works?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, been working on this since I would say 2022. It's been quite a journey, but I founded NiHowdy with a couple of pharmacists. Basically, we help individuals and organizations save on prescription costs. One of the things that's really cool is we actually return drug rebates back into the hands of consumers, and those drug rebates, they come in the form of Bitcoin. How it works is super easy. You just go on our website. You try to figure out which prescription you need to pay for. Typically, there's people who are insurance, and they might have a high deductible. We're sort of a good fit right there because typically, if you pay cash prices for healthcare, it's usually often almost always cheaper. We give you sort of these coupons. You would register with the member ID. You take that to the pharmacy along with your prescription, and in about I would say 30 days or so, when we collect the rebates from the manufacturers, we pay it out into your account.
So what are drug rebates? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a very controversial subject, but if you think about like any industry that sells products, typically wholesalers and manufacturers will try to incentivize retailers to push more of their products. So example I can give you is like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. If you're running a gas station and you have Pepsi and Coca-Cola in your refrigerator, Pepsi might say, look, if you sell 1,000 units, I'll give you 1% back. Coca-Cola might say, look, if you put us on the top of the shelf, I'll give you $5,000 for product placement, but I'll also give you 5% back if you sell 2,000 units. So it becomes a sort of game theory within, people who sell inventory of like which product should they sell. Pharmacy itself is no different. And again, I sort of mentioned this earlier, like when I used to own my pharmacy, I was very guilty of getting all these drug rebates from different manufacturers. You would have different manufacturers try to push the same products, and you have competing manufacturers. Sometimes you would be taking this into consideration on running your business of like, well, which product should I push more over the other for which manufacturer? And, drug rebates, they actually cause drugs to be much more inflated in price. And that's sort of why we built NiHowdy, is because we wanted to actually pass back drug rebates back into the hands of consumers. And no one does this in the industry. But with Bitcoin, it actually makes this possible for really two reasons. First reason is actually comes down to the transaction fees. Some of the medications that you buy at the pharmacy, they're actually worth like pennies on the dollar. It's super cheap. But the rebate on that would be probably like 2 to 3 cents on a 30-cent drug. How do I get you that back in terms of today's financial rails? It's kind of impossible. Do I PayPal you? I mean, as a business, it's like 30-cent transaction minimum plus a 3% interchange fee. But with Bitcoin on Lightning Network, the transaction fee is like less than 1,000th of a%. It's really cheap. It's fast. It's instant. That's why I love it. But the second reason why we chose Bitcoin as a rebate is really because a dollar today is still a dollar tomorrow, but a dollar of Bitcoin today could be potentially $100 in the future. And I think that's a really cool way of being able to sort of offset healthcare expenses. And sort of when we started running NiHowdy, I want to say in 2023 was right when we went live, we've been able to reduce healthcare expenses or prescription expenses by 25% for some of our users already. So it's been amazing sort of seeing the service. And we've been getting a lot of demand to actually go into the prescription industry as well. So that's something else we're building out. We're working with over 200 local first responders here to actually develop a men's wellness clinic. They will actually want rebates back on their prescriptions. So it's been sort of interesting to build, I would say, a Bitcoin healthcare startup. There's definitely a lot of challenges here, but our long-term vision or goal is really, can Bitcoin be used as a tool to sort of reduce healthcare expenses? Can it be used to reduce prescription costs? And I absolutely think in 10, 20 years, that's going to be a reality.
Well, it sounds like drug manufacturers are incentivizing pharmacies to prescribe or recommend certain medications for certain conditions in exchange for money. And maybe you have a handful of medications that all kind of get the job done for whatever that patient is experiencing. But if you say, hey, we're going to get you some of, the strobectamine, instead of the mycalazin, they all have insane names, then your pharmacy will get some cash back in exchange for making that recommendation. And you're right. Maybe we don't want to open up that can of worms. But regardless of whether that is okay, what you're doing is somehow capturing those rebates before they're paid out to the pharmacy, and I guess you're getting them in fiat, and then are you kind of converting that into Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 for all of our satillionaires, and then you're shooting that to the people who have the NiHowdy app, who are responsible for getting that prescription.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. Probably one thing I want to add on is, and this is probably going to blow a lot of your listeners' minds, is really in America, we actually have a 2-tier pricing system when it comes to prescriptions. Everyone, I myself pay taxes, you guys pay taxes, a lot of your American listeners probably pay taxes, and we all pay into something called Medicare. If you look at your W-2, all of us are paying to the system. And Medicare as an entity, as well as Medicaid, which is a state program, when they actually go out and buy drugs, 50% of their drug spend actually comes back to Medicare in the form of rebates. But for people who have to actually pay out of pocket because they're on a high deductible plan, or they just don't simply have the money to pay for the premiums that keep going up every single year, they don't get access to those rebates. Where does that money go? It ends up getting pocketed by the pharmacies. Sometimes these insurance companies will run a discount card themselves and try to recoup that rebate. So it's kind of like disgusting. Like, why is it that we all pay into the system, but it's a 2-tier payment model where effectively, the government gets 50% of the drug spend back, but the people who have to pay out of pocket, well, we're kind of just shafted. So if you sort of think about it, I mean, drug prices are almost inflated by 50%, yet we subsidize this entire industry with our own tax dollars. You have to kind of take a look at that and say, well, that's not right. Why don't I have access to cheaper medications? Just because Medicare represents people who are 65 and older, people like you and me at our age, a little bit younger, I mean, we're all paying into the system. And I don't think it works for everybody, unfortunately. So, this has sort of been a mission for us. NiHowdy is really, we need to give back drug rebates to people. We need to reduce healthcare expenses as much as possible. But we need to look at this in a different way and say, look, is it possible that we can actually not just reduce expenses, but can we offset it completely in the future? And I think Bitcoin is the right tool to do that.
Wow. Okay. So here's another example of, what I'll just call wage and price controls distorting the natural state of the market. And instead of a medication producer delivering his medication to the marketplace at the price so dictated by the laws of supply and demand, you have a gouvernement program, if I'm following this correctly, James, where the tax money collected from each citizen is likely supplemented by some money printing just on top, and then used to kind of subsidize or create a system of providing health care to older citizens. That results in a 50% rebate that goes back to the government. When a Medicare person buys medication, 50% of that price goes back to the government. So then the provider of the medication just doubles the price of their medication, so that once the government gets 50% back, they still have the amount of money that they wanted to have in the first place. Like, huh? Like that is both confusing, and I feel vaguely that I should be upset, but I don't even fully understand, what you're describing there. But it sounds like a wage and price control disrupting the normal marketplace.
It absolutely is. The question I love to ask the audience is really, do you think it's fair that, the government gets 50% of the drug spend back, but if you're left paying out of pocket, you don't get those rebates? How do you feel about that? Yet you're paying into the system, even though it's, benefiting people who are 65 and older, but don't you think you should still have access to the same pricing? I think it would piss people off.
How does that make you feel, man?
I feel like it's a broken system. I feel like it's a broken system that needs some kind of radical change agent or agents to come in and disrupt it. And I'm happy that we have people like James out there doing just that.
Okay, and so is NiHowdy just for people who don't have insurance and have to pay they have to like pay cash for medication, or does somebody with a healthcare plan, can they make money back? Like if I go to Costco to get some medication for some strep throat and I have healthcare, and they're like, okay, well, your share is, $20. Like, am I able to say, okay, well, check this out. I got NiHowdy, so I'm just gonna, register that I got my little rebate coupon thing, and then a month later I get a couple of sats off of that $20 purchase. Like, I'm trying to figure out if I can use this like right now.
Yeah, typically. So in that instance or the example you sort of gave, typically those rebates would actually go back to your employer. It doesn't go back to you as an individual. It goes back to the person who's actually paying for these things. So we do work with self-funded health plans. We work with hospice agencies to control their drug spend. But those are kind of like very niche audiences that we sort of work with. But in terms of actual users, it would be really, if you have a high deductible or just ridiculously high copays, it's worth investigating to see, how much is this worth, like out of pocket. And, we're a terrific solution right here for people who do have high deductible plans or their copay is just ridiculously high. And on a medication like, say, lisinopril, their copay is like $40. Lisinopril itself is like $6-7 through us, so it's much cheaper.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's a phenomenon whereby the health insurance cost of a prescription medication is often higher than if you were just to pay cash without letting the pharmacy know that you have a form of health insurance. You just kind of say, hey, they say, hey, do you have health insurance? You're like, look, can I just pay the cash price for this thing? In that scenario, where the prescription medication is cheaper on its own than through the aegis of a health insurance plan, then you would pay that cash price for the medication, and you would, log it against the NiHowdy kind of discount card. and then that, kind of drug rebate attached to the cash price of the prescription would then come back to you in the form of sats.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Okay. All right. Well, guess what? I'm checking every single time I need to buy prescription medication,
What's
dude.
that cash price?
What's that cash price?
Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah.
So, one last thing, if you could give us like a quick overview of that paper you're getting ready to publish.
Taken me about a year to put this together, and we finally tentatively have been approved to actually publish this paper. And by the way, it's very hard to talk about Bitcoin in the healthcare community. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later, but my paper I'm publishing, it's basically prescription drug pricing on a Bitcoin standard. It's a new take on healthcare affordability. And I sort of look over, 10,000 different drugs from 2019 to current day to sort of determine how much have drug prices gone up over the last, 6 years or so. And depending on the drug, it's gone up a lot. I mean, half the medications that Medicare covers, I mean, the price of it in 2019, 2020 doubled. Just more, it rose faster than the price of than the increase of inflation. So it's been kind of crazy. And I'd love to just show you some of the data for some of these drugs. I mean, I pulled up on my screen here. Like Eliquis is a very popular blood thinner medication. From 2019 to 2025, it increased about 27%. But in terms of being on a Bitcoin standard, it went down 830%. Another drug I can give you here, Januvia. This is very popular for diabetes. It went down about 36% in terms of fiat, so it did go down price. But on a Bitcoin standard, it went down 1,653%. Ozempic. This is a pretty common drug used for weight loss. It went up about 9% from 2019 to 2025. But in Bitcoin terms, it went down 1,064%.
Wow. Okay.
This is even more pronounced with generic medications. I just gave you some brand name drugs, but generic medications, levothyroxine, this one is used for hypothyroidism, people who have insufficient T4 that they're producing in their thyroid. It went down about 498% in terms of fiat, but on a Bitcoin standard, it went down 7,566%. It's a lot. So this data is very, in terms of, what I look at and what I put together, it's very compelling for a lot of healthcare providers to sort of consider this and say, look, I mean, we have to take a look at other different ways of approaching healthcare expenses. And I think Bitcoin is one of the most, logical ways to go about that.
Can you imagine your healthcare expenses becoming 75x cheaper over 6-7 years? It's incredible. It's incredible. So let's recap the conversation here with James, because Bitcoin is so big, you're never going to fit it into a single chat about sats. But we do ask each of our guests if they'd be willing to come back on in 9 months to give us an update on their Bitcoin baby. We would love to have you back on in 9 months to hear more about how your paper did after you published it, to maybe uncork that conversation around how difficult it is to talk about Bitcoin in the healthcare industry, and just to check in on you in general and see and prove to our statillionaires the benefits of adopting a Bitcoin standard over time. Would you be willing to jump back on the show in 9 months with us, James?
Absolutely. That'd be awesome.
Let's go. Okay, so let's recap. James, university, Silk Road, insert drug here, not a prescription one, recreational style. Used it, had it, made it work, 100 Bitcoin on the laptop, tossed the laptop. See you later, $90 million. Came back to it a little bit later. Silk Road still vibing. And maybe even from a pharmaceutical perspective, I think you mentioned that you had to like almost determine where your patients were getting their drugs from. But near the end of your time in the brick and mortar pharmacy space, 2019, moving into 2020 with the pandemic, burnout, you kind of latched onto Bitcoin properly, right? So I guess third time is the charm. Researched it through YouTube, but also researched it just by wrecking yourself in the crypto casino and getting rugged constantly left and right. And unfortunately, listening to some influencers who were, directing you toward that shiny new piece of crypto that turned out to be worthless. So you went through the school of hard knocks, ended up understanding that Bitcoin is valuable because it is not centralized. It is decentralized. It has no issuer. And you really kind of just folded the entirety of your wealth into Bitcoin. Pharmacy go bye-bye, assisted living care go bye-bye, stocks go bye-bye, chair go bye-bye. James chair, bye-bye. And adopted a Bitcoin standard for years that has done well for you. It's all about Sats flow. That was cool.
That was that term.
I like that. Because people talk, there's no cash flow to Bitcoin. Yeah, but there's Sats flow. Let's go. So as long as you're stacking more Sats each month than are leaving your stack, you're in good shape. And you, operate or interoperate with the fiat world by having some cash, kind of like Chris talked about, having Bitcoin in the dugout, maybe some lightning on deck, and then cash is in the batting box. So you got some cash in the batting box. If the exchange rate is lower, as it is right now, you kind of go ahead and let that cash dissipate until you're at a price or an exchange rate where you're like, okay, let me refill my cash. And you just kind of operate in that way, exchanging in and out of fiat and Bitcoin to power your lifestyle. You decided to go full-time on NiHowdy with your co-founder there. And it's effectively it is a way for people to get some sats when they buy prescription medications. If they're in a place where the cash price of their prescription medication is more advantageous to them than the health insurance price of that prescription medication, then they can use NiHowdy to get some sats in exchange for that purchase, which is incredible. So we loved having that conversation with you, James. We're already big fans of James. And we want to make you an offer here. But before we do, we're going to take a little bit of a brain break and try some Ithaca hummus here in the studio on your behalf. You're out there. Is it San Francisco?
I'm in San Jose. It's an hour south of San Francisco.
San Jose. Okay. So San Jose, have you ever heard of Ithaca hummus? Have you ever seen it?
No. The first time I found out about it was actually watching you guys' podcast. I'd love to try it.
Wow. See, there you go. Now, I will say, James, we taste Ithaca hummus on every episode, and you just said it, right? That's how you learned about our brand, right? So Ithaca Hummus is one of our sponsors. That's why we sponsor the show. We are now looking for a chip or cracker sponsor. So this week I've been running through all of my favorite chips and crackers and bringing them on the show. What we typically do is we have an unbranded woven wheat cracker because no one's paying for this slot yet. And as you just mentioned, it's very valuable. Okay. We do this on every episode. That's a lot of eyeballs on your chip or cracker here.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to be using Firehook, and I love these crackers. They first showed up on my mother-in-law's cheese boards. Just about every cheese and charcuterie board she put together, she has to have these. And then eventually I had to have them too. So we're going to pair that up with the new sea salt, olive oil, sea salt, Graza Ithaca collab.
Yeah, so we've got Firehook baked crackers, sea salt, and we've got the Graza collab. Here we go.
Really nice. I love the simplicity of these crackers. They nail the texture.
I like that they're like rectangles.
It's like a rustic, very artisanal cracker.
Yeah, it kind of has like a breadstick flavor.
Totally.
And the size of it is good because like I can get a fat glob of the Ithaca Hummus Graza collab, but there's still enough chip to kind of mix in there with the hummus. Like I'm not running out of chip over here.
Yeah, you could cleanse your palate, or you can do like I'm about to do, which is flip it over so you don't double dip.
Flip the dip.
Flip, re-dip, and then go in with the chip.
Past the lips. So where can James get Ithaca hummus in and around San Jose?
Well, James, you could find Ithaca hummus and Firehook crackers at your local Whole Foods. You can find us in Kroger. You can find us in Sprouts, and many, many other national retailers. But those are the easy ones to suggest.
So, James, next time you hit Whole Foods, we want you to get some of this Grasa collab with Ithaca hummus. Try it, and then we want you to come to the comment section of your Sat Chats video and tell us what you thought about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm totally down. There's actually a Whole Foods right down the street, so love to give it a try.
Awesome.
So let's make James his offer.
All right, James. So here on Sat Chats, we believe in exchanging value for value. And so as a small token of our appreciation for sharing your time and your experience with us and our audience, we're going to give you the choice between the old $50 bill, 50 US dollars, or you could have instead $50 worth of Bitcoin, which I'm going to calculate using the Clark Moody Bitcoin dashboard right behind me. The exchange rate of Bitcoin, one Bitcoin right now, is $86,660, which translates to 1,154 sats per dollar. So 1154 times $50 is 57,700 sats.
This is such an easy choice. I mean, I'm obviously going to choose the Bitcoin, of course.
Yeah.
But,
Yes, sir.
Those sats are going to go up for today, boy.
Ooh, boy. So 57,700 sats for James. Get back in the corner and think about what you've done. You slip a nation state paper.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna turn it around.
Turn it around, dude. Don't even show me your face, Mr. Ulysses S. Grant. Don't look at me.
Yep.
So we love that you chose the sats, James. You bring our score to 43 guests who have chosen to stack the sats, and 4 who asked for the cash. So number 47, James, that is your number. You will always be known forever on the Sat Chats, Sat chain here as number 47, James. And this is the part of the show where we are going to ask you, Satillionaires, for your value in exchange for ours. If you've made it this far, if you enjoyed James's Bitcoin story and his company, NiHowdy, smash the like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you are part of the 999 plus one who will be entered in for the giveaway, right? Don't you want to be randomly selected to receive 1 million sats? I know I do. Hit us with 5 stars on Spotify. When we get to that 999 plus one, we will unlock the live show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. James, if our Satillionaires want to engage with you online, if they want to follow you, if they want to engage with NiHowdy, where are they going to go? Where do you want to send them?
Yeah, our company, our website's going to be NiHowdy.com. You can find us on Instagram, NiHowdyRX, also on Twitter, NiHowdyRX as well. We're pretty active also on LinkedIn. Just look up NiHowdy.
Okay, and that's NiHowdy for everyone on Spotify. You can also now support our show directly, if you like, Our on-chain Bitcoin address is in the show notes of YouTube and Spotify. Our Lightning address is there as well. You can also just zap it to satchats@getalby.com without even needing to go down into the show notes. So remember, Sat Chats is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial advice. Also, our guests' views are their own. Thanks so much, James. Thanks so much, Satillionaires. We'll see you on the next one.